Hey there, I'm Lee Ullman here with some big news from the National Young Farmers Coalition. We're partnering with Heritage Radio Network on a special season of The Farm Report. It's all about what's happening with the Farm Bill and how it impacts farmers and eaters.
I am growing diversified vegetables on land that's been in our family for 150 years.
And so with the pandemic, gentrification, property values going up, we had to sell the land and we lost it.
Join us as we uncover the untold stories behind this massive piece of legislation that shapes how we grow our food, what we eat, and so much more.
The problems we have had, those are things that come from earlier Farm Bill and USDA policy, right? Like Earl Butts, get big or get out.
You know, it's my responsibility to know not only what I'm eating, but then like how that all came to be. And realize like, wow, like this piece of legislation, all this money, like it's technically something that I support as a taxpayer.
While Congress debates the next Farm Bill, this is not just an invitation to listen. It's a call to action. Be part of the conversation. Subscribe to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network, wherever you listen to podcasts.
You're listening to Item 13, an African food podcast, and I'm your host, Yom Tego. Every other week, we'll delve into the world of African food, including chefs, curators, and bloggers. Here's the show. So today I have with me Aiden Hagos, who is a celebrated host and food writer based in Canada, Toronto, whose work I discovered actually while I was moving to Toronto and have followed very closely since then. Welcome to the show, Aiden.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know it's been a long time coming. We've been trying to get this in the books for a while. I'm glad we finally got to do this for the beginning of the year, and especially since we're going to be talking about, you know, the Black food experience and coming off of, I spent the holidays, I was telling you earlier, in Ghana with all of the Year of Return. I think this is actually a good episode to kick off the year and talking about diaspora experiences, especially when it's related to our food and our roots and how all of that is connected. But first, I wanted to start with your personal story. Let us know who you are, and as much as you're comfortable sharing, like where did you grow up and sort of what were your early connections or memories with food or of food?
Sure. So I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, which is a small city right at like the border to the U.S. It was right on the other side, and so it was cool. So I grew up like very much in Canada, but very close to the U.S. and spent a lot of time in the U.S. And my family had opened an Ethiopian restaurant, and a lot of their clients or customers would come and cross the border to get a taste of like the Ethiopian food. And that's what I grew up around, seeing my grandmother cooking, my uncles and aunts cooking and serving at the restaurant, as well as my dad, and just like always being surrounded by Ethiopian food and people who are like kind of hustling in the food space.
Yeah.
So that, I think that's what gave me the backdrop for what I do right now.
Yeah. And then, so what was the actual, so, you know, you grew up in I'm assuming you also helped out in the restaurant when you could, or not at all?
No, I was like 7.
Okay.
I helped eat. I can't front like I was in there. But they owned it in the 90s, and
okay.
I was pretty young, and then they ended up selling it. I think like in the early 2000s. So
okay.
I was very, very young,
okay.
but I still have like very vivid memories of it. And my grandmother like continued to sell. She sold injera, the flatbread, yeah. So she kind of had her own like operation out of her house, and my uncles were her employees. You know, so I kind of was more of like an observer.
Okay. And so then how do you go from that? So you started, you know, you grew up with your family restaurant, and then that sort of was out of the picture for a while. How do you go from that to starting your platform, Black Foodie?
Yeah, so I was, by this point, like I studied something very like outside of the space. I studied sociology in college. Yeah, and then I was doing like a fellowship program in Toronto that opened my eyes to entrepreneurship and just thinking differently about like career paths. And at that same time, I was celebrating a birthday like midway through the fellowship, and I had a very like horrible experience that just was racist, where I felt that, you know, the staff didn't want my group there because we were a group of young Black women, and it was a really upsetting experience, and it made me question, one, why is this still happening, you know, in Toronto, a very diverse city, and then two, why I never chose to go to restaurants like the restaurants my family owned. I never chose to go to Ethiopian or other African or Caribbean restaurants. In fact, I kind of avoided it because not because I didn't like the food, but a lot of the food is different. You eat with your hands. It has like strong spices, a lot of onions, and so you smell like the food afterwards. And because of that, I just felt this shame around eating my cultural food, which was whack. Just
and that, I mean, I find that actually quite interesting because when my friends and I talk about West African food experiences in particular in that same context, I hesitate to use the word, but the shame, I guess, that we experience is more from the lack of customer service, or there's just a lot around the experience itself, not necessarily the food, but the experience itself that prevents us or makes us not want to, patronize it as much or share it with people outside of our community, and the conversations that we have almost always come down to how do these Ethiopians do it? Like the Ethiopian restaurants, like everywhere, and people are there eating with their hands, and the service is typically great. But why can't like West African people get their act together? So that's an interesting juxtaposition, I guess, of how we think about how our food is shared with the rest of the world, I guess, in the context of a restaurant. But anyway, I interrupted you. So.
No worries. It's something I think about too, because I agree with you. I haven't tried enough different West African foods, but from the things that I have tried, like which are generally like from Senegal, Ghana, Nigeria, and like Cote d'Ivoire and stuff, like it's really good. And it's also like, Ethiopians, I think, are really good at showcasing, the health benefits of like the different grains and stuff that they use, and the fact like the bread is fermented. And I think people understand like, oh, okay, if I go to an Ethiopian restaurant, I can have something that's gluten-free and vegan friendly, and like this kind of like rich experience around like the coffee.
I was going to say there's also the cultural element, right? Just the fun. I mean, it's a different experience of whether it's eating with your hands in certain Ethiopian restaurants or like how you sit, and then like you said, the coffee experience too. I think there's an experience element or component that also makes it attractive, right?
Yeah, there's like this richness that you get when you if you are down for it and go ahead and order the coffee ceremony and go ahead and like choose not to use a fork. But I do think that there are similar, or like there are also really amazing elements to dining and having West African food. I just had a Senegalese chef prepare this like amazing meal for me in Atlanta last week, and I was like, okay, I got to know how to really eat, how to eat it. Like I know how to eat Ethiopian food, like I got that pretty down, but like I need to understand how to eat Senegalese. I'm gonna butcher it, but it's like chepu jen, and
their version of jollof is what some people will say.
Exactly, it's their version, the original jollof, and it was so good. And he was showing me how to eat it, and it was so like what is it called? Like you're able to kind of like get to know the guests that you're with better. It was very communal. It was very delicious. The presentation was great. And I thought, okay, well, why this should be out in the mainstream media. Like, I'm not sure why there aren't more
Yeah.
restaurants packed,
That's a good question. And so I guess just to clarify, not to say that we don't have cultural elements. I just think that Ethiopians have done a better job of like selling their culture through their food, right? I don't know what and how, from a West African perspective, we can do that. And to some extent, I don't know if we try to assimilate almost too much when we present our food to the detriment of showcasing our culture. Like I really don't know, to be honest. I don't know.
I know. I mean, I just want to find somebody who like does research on immigration patterns, because I feel like a part of the reason there are so many Ethiopian restaurants and it's popular is maybe, I'm assuming more of them have immigrated to the U.S.
and that's
Canada, and like, because and in a lot of cities you see like immigrants, they open restaurants first because they can work for themselves. They have like the skills. They don't have to necessarily know the language as well, and they can have their whole family involved.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's a podcast for another day, but it is something I'm very curious about.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. And the one person I know that's done a little bit more history, although he's pretty focused on West Africa, and I think you've actually met him or interviewed him before, is Michael Tweedy, who I feel but I feel like he's more focused on the West African history and probably also migration to a certain extent.
And how it ties into the southern cuisine.
Exactly. Yeah. But I don't know that anyone has looked at the Ethiopian phenomenon, because I would be very interested to understand, because I think it could be a good case study for other regions of the continent and how they present their food, or share their food with in the diaspora. But anyway, we lost our train of thought. What we're talking about? Oh yeah, how you started Black Foodie. So you had that experience in the restaurant, how you were treated.
So then I just decided like, hey, I'm going to change this. I want to learn more about the food I grew up on and just support Black-owned restaurants in general. And so I just started digging into, like Google and finding different restaurants and sharing my experience on the social media platforms I already had, Facebook and Instagram, and then, gathered this into Black Foodie because I understood that there are lots of other people like me who are probably just as curious or maybe have more, information than I do that could share. And I started going to events where I would be able to like network and learn more and just sharing my experiences on the website. And from there, I grew a fairly large audience and started hosting events for them as well. Because food is something you need to experience in person. You can read about it. You can see a recipe and try it on your own. But I don't think there's anything that beats going in and tasting it for yourself or getting to connect with a chef.
Because I always say it's Instagram has also been really great for food businesses and food bloggers in general. But I say once they crack the code of even being able to smell that food, because sometimes you see pictures and it just doesn't do it justice. You have to actually, be in the same room, taste the food, to actually know what it's about. So you started hosting food events. Now I know of Injera and Chill and Doubles versus Patties. Which, do you want to tell people what those two events are? And maybe after that, let's tell people what Ethiopia, because I one of my really good friends is Ethiopian, so I'm very familiar with Ethiopian food. But just for the benefit of those listening, also maybe we might want to dive into Ethiopian food in general, what it's about, and the different components of the cuisine.
Sure. So I've hosted several different types of events. I'm always interested in bringing people together for a good time around food too. So hosted everything from really intimate dinners with private chefs to hosting food competitions with a DJ and having a party vibe to it. And that's something that you'd find at Injera and Chill, where we just focus on Ethiopian cuisine and Eritrean cuisine. And then I have another event called Doubles vs. Patties, where we'd have different Caribbean foods from Jamaica and from Trinidad, And this year I'm focusing on kind of really branching out and doing something bigger. So I'm really hoping to host a large event this summer that incorporates all of these different elements from West Africa to the Caribbean to the South to everywhere the African diaspora has gone. And I'll hopefully be able to have updates for you in another podcast.
Okay. That sounds good. We just got the preview to what's coming. And will this just, I know you probably don't want to share too much, but will this be in Toronto? Just so.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be in Toronto, and then I'm going to be doing something later in the year in Atlanta.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. That's exciting.
Yeah, I kind of just jumped back and forth, and I definitely, have a strong, I think, American audience as well as Canadian audience. So I want to be able to cater to both crowds.
Yeah. And then, so in terms of like hosting those, and I've done a few too, like, could you speak then to because of the broad audience you have, what are some of the, I guess, I don't want to do just the worst part. So what are the best parts of hosting these food events? And then what are the things in terms of challenges that you're learning as you put on these events?
I think the best part is really seeing people get excited about the food and, in advance, posting about it, and then seeing the reactions in person and seeing people just enjoy themselves and maybe try something they hadn't tried before, or connect with a chef now that they could hire for later for catering. So I think it's a combination. One, seeing the joy of people eating and having a good time, and then two, seeing other Black food entrepreneurs get put on and get opportunities from it. That's something that I really like to see.
Okay. Cool stuff. I think this is a good time to take a short break. And then when we come back, we'll go back to, because I forgot and you forgot, we'll go back to telling people what Ethiopian food is all about. Then we'll talk about the Black food experience in the diaspora. Because I can picture, actually, when I was back home, we had an injera. You could call it an injera and chill too, like an injera party. So, and maybe I might post a video of that too online when we post this episode.
That's dope.
Yeah. We bought injera from someone, but then my friend made most of everything else. So it was kind of cool to do that. Okay, so we'll take a break, and when we're back, we'll dive into, so that people don't ask me later, what's injera? Like, I know what it is in my head, but we have a lot of people that listen that are trying to learn more about African foods, and so may not have tried that yet. So we'll be right back.
You're listening to Item 13, an African food podcast. We'll be right back.
Before I forget, let's start with Ethiopian food. What my personal experience has just been with injera, with dorowat, and all the little like stews and vegetable sides and whatnot. And I wonder sometimes if that's what everyone eats across Ethiopia, or because, people think because jollof has been propagated so much, like people think West African food is jollof. So I want to get a sense of what, first of all, what the staple foods of Ethiopia are, and then like what are some of the unexpected things that we may not know about Ethiopian food that has not been shared as much.
Okay. So sorry, I'm going to pause.
That's okay.
So you'd like me to give like an overview of what Ethiopian food is,
yes,
and then also about like the lesser known foods that come out of Ethiopia.
Yes.
Okay, great. So the best way I can describe Ethiopian food is it's like a full experience. You eat with your hands. There are lots of different, scents. When you have the coffee, there's incense that usually burns, and you eat with your hands, and you share the platter with, your family and friends. So it's very much a communal, full experience. For the most part, injera is eaten widely across the country, but not everywhere, which I learned recently. And injera is this fermented flatbread that is made with F grain that is native to Ethiopia and is now like considered a superfood. It's really rich in iron. It's very healthy, and it's gluten-free. So that's just a natural part of the Ethiopian diet. And now it's popular and used in other products. But its main, purpose was for injera bread in Ethiopia. And that takes a few days to make. It's fermented. So Ethiopian food can be labor intensive, but it's definitely worth it. Usually it's, prepared on a platter, and there are different stews that are placed on top. There's this culture of fasting in Ethiopia that's connected to the Orthodox faith, Orthodox Christian faith, where leading up to certain holidays and on certain days of the week, people fast, and that's just them excluding meat and dairy from their diet on Wednesdays, Fridays, and then months leading up to certain like religious holidays. So for the most part, you've got a lot of different vegan options in Ethiopia that you wouldn't find in other cuisines. And I think that's what makes it very popular here in the West, that it's really, really delicious food. You don't feel like, like all you get is a salad. But it is completely vegan. And like even people when I was there that don't seem very religious, like still, if they're Orthodox Christian, a lot of them will still, follow that and remain fasting on the certain days that they're supposed to fast. And that's a great thing. So if you ever go to Ethiopia, you can get like a vegan latte, you can have a vegan macchiato, you can have vegan tiramisu. Yeah, you can. They won't call it vegan. They're going to call it fasting.
Right. Yeah.
Fasting. But that's something I think that's really unique about Ethiopia that you don't find in many other places.
Well, I think that's so cool. And that's the opportunity there too. I think with African food in general, because a lot of our fruits and grains are, gluten-free, they're protein-rich, and there's opportunity. When I think about, obviously that I do some work that's similar to you, and as I think about how I'm going to evolve in this space, I think about how food entrepreneurs can take advantage of trends here to create like economic opportunities, right? And one of these things I think about is movements around vegan and gluten-free, and how those are naturally occurring foods within our cuisine, and how do people sort of position themselves to take advantage of that. That's something that I think about a lot, actually. I don't have answers yet, but it's something that I think about quite a bit. So that's it. I did not know that about that Ethiopian culture, and I knew about teff and its attributes, but did not realize, the stuff about fasting and how that translates into vegan, primarily vegan food in Ethiopia. So that's cool, actually.
Yeah, I think it'll explain a lot as to why there's so many like options, the next time you go to an Ethiopian restaurant. But the other thing that I think is interesting is I recently went to Ethiopia in October and September for in a partnership with Ethiopian Airlines, and I got to visit a lot of sort of like more remote areas of Ethiopia and go to different villages that I had never been. I had traveled throughout Ethiopia, but I had never been to like this side of Ethiopia. Because I think like a lot of diaspora can understand, like usually when you go back home, you stay with your family, you go to your family's ethnic region, your ethnic group. But I got to experience many different ethnicities, and I found that like many of the places I went to, injera was not a part of the diet. They had they had their own foods that they prepared, and moringa was a huge part of the diet in the south. And sorghum grain, and like everybody seemed very healthy. And then I just went on this whole dive into what moringa is and the health benefits, and it's super interesting. Another thing that you will find in Ethiopia, if you're really into food, is there's these trees. They call it like false banana.
Okay.
I can't remember. Yeah, it looks like a banana tree, but it doesn't actually produce fruit in that way. But people use the root. They scrape the fibers from the root, and they prepare their own fermented flatbread from it. They bury it under the ground. Yeah, and it's a delicacy. Like if you ever go to an Ethiopian wedding, you'll find kitfo and kocho, which is like a raw meat dish prepared with butter, and they use this fermented bread to eat it with instead of injera. And It is interesting. I mean, it's an acquired taste. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't like it. I don't like it. Most of my friends who grew up here don't like it because we didn't grow up eating it.
Yeah.
But when I tried it there, I found it didn't have the same kind of funky taste that I was used to in Canada. But anyways, super interesting that if you look into false banana trees, you'll see that there are different health benefits from that as well. And the fermenting process is like just like a natural part of a lot of the ways that we prepare food. And now everybody's into fermented foods. So yeah, there are all these things that are like health trends now that are just a natural part of African, like the way Africans prepare food.
Yeah.
That I'm like, I'm curious about.
That is so, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. And that must have been so dope too, actually, just to be able to do that, I think. Because I don't think we have enough documentation of the like food that is not in a mainstream, right? And I think that there's hidden gems that we, I don't know if we've lost culturally because more and more people are living in cities. But there's probably a lot more that can be done in terms of exploring and how that can be shared with the rest of the world, I guess.
I have more things I want to share. I just couldn't. I got deleted off my Instagram because people dress differently there. You know what I mean? So a lot of like they might have their chest bare or that kind of stuff.
I could not. Yeah. Oh, that's too bad.
I know. I'm going to try to see if I can edit it in a way that is, respectful, and showcases it. Because that is the way that they dress, and that is the norm. Right. So it wasn't like, prying into it. But I do feel like my major takeaway was just like flavor, like what determines flavor. Because I found that when I was there, I went into certain villages and I asked them like, hey, can you just teach me what you cook? And I had a translator translate for me. And I found that there was like very little seasoning or, spices that are prepared. It's just literally sorghum, water, and moringa. And that is it, like completely unprocessed, completely like not, like no additives, nothing. That was the only thing they ate. Alongside like sometimes some meat that they would
it makes me wonder how we develop and our flavor palettes and how certain textures we get used to or are okay with versus not. It's also interesting, but I mean there's so much I'm probably preaching to the choir, but there's so much to explore like with food and history and culture. But I feel like for a lot of us, we've only scratched the surface,
I agree with you. Yeah, there's so much. I want to like find a researcher, like a scientist, something to like help me explain how taste works and how we develop our taste different foods.
All of that. There's just so much to do. And I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you too was just based on the work you've done, because you look at it from the African perspective and then from the Black Canadian perspective, and then you also done some work because Canada, or Toronto in particular, has a huge Caribbean population. You also cater to that, and wanted to get your thoughts on what you think overall the Black food experience is like in the diaspora, what people are looking for in a Black food experience, and then if there are similarities across those three buckets, I guess, and differences that you've seen as you've done the work that you do.
I've seen so much. It's hard to like, synthesize, like make it, explain it in a short sentence. But essentially, I feel like a lot of, African and Caribbean food has been overlooked for quite some time by other communities, not necessarily us, but by other communities. And now people are starting to look to us, and I think, especially with like, trends towards eating healthier and towards superfoods, now people are curious about these things that come out of Africa, like baobab or moringa or fonio or teff, like, these superfoods that are just naturally a part of our diets. I think that that there's like this huge opportunity for Black food entrepreneurs and African food entrepreneurs who understand the market. I think that in general too, a lot of people in the diaspora, food is important in general, but especially to us, like there's so much of our memories of back home tied to our food. And I think that there is a big push to learn more about our cultural foods, where it comes from, you know, the things that our grandmas would make. I feel like there's more of an excitement about learning now. So I think it's great that there's podcasts like yours, or like there's, you know, like things like Black Foodie out there now to help guide people.
And I think it's funny because sometimes there are times when I think, okay, I've done all this work, there's all this information out there, like people should know more. And then, like I said, I was home in Accra for the Year of the Return, which for those who don't know is I guess an initiative by the Ghana government to connect with the African diaspora, especially, I guess this year was particularly significant in that it's 400 years after the slave trade began, or the first slaves were taken out of Ghana. And so there's been a deliberate effort to connect those that left versus those that stayed, to see what economic opportunities there are that we can collaborate on, and just culturally how we can connect. And one of the things that surprised me is when people still ask about food, because I was in a couple of different social groups that were formed ahead of the Year of Return. And there were people that were coming home for the first time and were asking questions that I thought, just with the advent of Instagram and all these chefs and stuff, that people would know. But it just made me realize that there's still so much work to be done just in the basic education. Now, you and I are talking about, you know, the further like history and research that needs to be done to discover more ingredients, more cultural practices, I guess, around our food. But even some of the basic stuff that we take for granted, it's still like people have still yet to experience or understand. So there's a lot to do in this space, and there's a lot of work to be done. So, which is why I'm always happy to work with people like you, or, you know, down diaspora, because I think there's room for a lot of people to be in this space to do the things that we do, because there's just unbelievably, in my mind, so much still to be done. So I think it's an exciting time to be in this space, I think.
I agree with you. It's the future is Africa. Somebody was telling me that this food entrepreneur, actually, he's a Canadian food entrepreneur who has roots in Mali. He's bringing superfoods here, and he was like, you know what, the future is Africa. Like, this is it. And I was like, yes, I
believe it.
Yes.
I believe it for sure. So you kind of hinted as to what you're going to do in terms of your plans for 2020, but if you're not ready to go into specifics, generally speaking, where do you see Black Foodie going the next year, the next few years? What's your thoughts on the things that you could be doing, what people should be looking out for?
Yeah, I'm going to be doing more video storytelling, like, you know, content series that really look into our culture, our heritage, and our stories through food. Mm-hmm. So I definitely want to open that up. Like, I was documenting my time in Ethiopia, and I'd never, ever received the kind of feedback that I did on social media, where, like, you know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people were viewing stuff on my personal accounts, where I don't have that reach, you know, on my personal social media account. So it was crazy to me. And I got so many messages from other Ethiopians in the diaspora saying, hey, I didn't know that, or wow, thank you. Like, this reminds me of, you know, this experience. And I think that so much of our memories are tied to food, and I want to help, you know, I want to help create new memories, and also like bring people back to that like feeling of home. So definitely look out for more video content, and then like some, you know, larger, more impactful events that incorporate all of the elements that Black Foodie celebrates. So I'm really, you know, working on partnerships right now, working on, you know, reaching out to the right people to get myself in the right position to host these, and definitely trying to make more of a, you know, in addition to Black Foodie, just on a personal, like for my personal brand, making Ethiopian spices more accessible to the public. I love Ethiopian food. My I'll always be passionate about it. And I've got a unique family that's been in this business for generations. Like my grandfather had a spice market.
Oh.
So, yeah. So that was in Eritrea when Eritrea used to be a part of Ethiopia.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So
that is so cool, actually.
It is very cool, and I'm hoping to enter the family business, not necessarily the restaurants, but the spices, bringing back those flavors.
That would be cool. That would be really cool,
yeah.
Actually. Okay, so before we transition into the rapid fire, can you let people who don't know where they can find you online, where they can, social media, website, do you want to share your specific handles, website?
Sure. So you can hit me up at blackfoodie.co on Instagram, blackfoodie.co on the website if you want to read some of the articles that are really dope, or follow my personal Instagram, Eden the Foodie, at Eden the Foodie on across the board on Instagram and Twitter. I share lots of funny things as well as food things. I like that fun, and I think I don't want to take things too seriously. I think food is culture, and I definitely want to share that. So if you're interested in fun food stories or interviews with chefs or learning different cultural recipes, then hit me up at blackfoodie.co or Eden the Foodie, or both. Show some love. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Let's do the rapid fire segment then. There's super short, easy questions. First thought that comes to your mind, you can share. Okay, so we'll start with easy ones and then we'll progress. So in terms of food, sweet or salty?
Sweet.
Doubles or patties? We should probably explain what that is to people.
Yeah, doubles are street food in Trinidad and I think Guyana too, and it's just basically curried chickpeas in between two fried pieces of dough.
Mm-hmm.
It's really delicious with tamarind sauce and hot pepper sauce. I would definitely have to go with doubles.
Just by the way you were describing it, I felt like you were leaning that way anyway.
Yeah, but I can't knock patties because there are some amazing patties, especially if you go to there are artisan patties. You could get oxtail patties and so many different crazy flavors. Yeah. I love those too.
Okay. Red wine or white wine?
Red.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Dine in. I should have figured. Dine in or take out?
Dine in.
Morning person or night person?
I think I'm a night person.
Okay. And then if you could live on one dish for the rest of your life, what would that be?
One dish?
Yeah.
I'm going to choose kitcha fit, a dish I know most people don't know about. It's an Ethiopian Eritrean dish, basically broken up pieces of homemade flatbread drenched in Ethiopian spice butter. Ooh. And Ethiopian butter spice. Yeah. It's crunchy. It's super not good for you, but it's delicious, It's not healthy at all, but it's really a comfort dish and it'll fill you up.
Cool. Yeah, I guess if it's the one thing you're gonna have that sounds like it. And then your favorite African restaurant anywhere in the world?
My favorite African restaurant anywhere in the world? Ooh, that's a tough one. No, actually, no, it's not too tough. But I have more restaurants to go to. So, but for now, they're definitely in my top 5 list. There's a restaurant in Montreal called Akwaba, and I know that's a Ghanaian phrase.
Yeah.
But the owners are from Côte d'Ivoire, and
that's interesting.
Yeah. And they basically they used to live in Greece before coming to Canada, and had a restaurant there. So basically they fuse different West African foods with Greek flavors. It's it's the strangest combination, but it really works. And they have everything from Senegalese dishes to things from their homeland in Côte d'Ivoire to some sort of African Greek salad that has papaya and mango. And the chef is just like, just about it. Like he likes to choose, he doesn't want to be, confined to one thing. And I love that. And I think that's kind of like what Canada is, like you get a little bit of everything.
Yeah. No, that is, I've made a note of it. I need to check it out the next time I'm in Montreal. That sounds so cool, actually.
Yeah, I highly recommend it.
Interesting.
Montreal has so many great African restaurants.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That was easy, I think. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you. I learned so much actually myself, so that unexpected things about Ethiopian food culture. And I'm really excited I love the work that you do, and I'm excited for what's coming this year. I'll see if I can make it to Atlanta if I get those dates out in time, but I think that would be great. We'll be following you to see when those big events happen so that people can participate. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was great.
Thank you for listening to Item 13, an African food podcast. If you like the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast app. To keep up to date, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter @Item13 Podcast. Thank you.